Welcome to Things You Don't Know. In episode one of this series, we examined how fear of communism led the United States to support authoritarian rulers, interfere with elected governments, and postpone concern about human rights.
In this episode, we turn to another part of the record rulers, armies, and resistance movements that Washington supported for strategic reasons, but later abandoned, fought, invaded, or even opposed.
And that includes Saddam Hussein and Manuel Noriega. It also includes the Afghan resistance, although the popular story of Osama bin Laden is frequently misstated.
We need to begin with a distinction. Supporting a dictator does not necessarily mean creating him, controlling him, or approving everything he does.
But it can give him money, legitimacy, intelligence, weapons, diplomatic protection, and additional years in power.
And when that relationship breaks down, the former partner will already possess greater power because of the assistance he received.
After the Belgian Congo became independent in 1960, the country immediately fell into crisis. Prime Minister Lumumba requested Soviet assistance after failing to obtain the military support he wanted from the United States and the United Nations.
That made American officials fear that the strategically important Congo might fall under Soviet influence. Army officer Joseph Mobutu carried out a coup in September 1960. American records show the CIA provided covert money to the new authorities and supported anti-communist political operations.
Mobutu later seized permanent control.
In 1965, after the collapse of the Katanga succession, Mobutu took power again and eventually renamed the country Zaire. He ruled for more than 3 decades.
His government became a one-party dictatorship built around personal loyalty, corruption, political repression, and control of national resources.
And Dr. Weaver, the United States continued to support him. Why?
He opposed Soviet influence, cooperated with American policy, and supported anti-communist forces in Central and Southern Africa.
So Washington also feared that removing him might destabilize a huge mineral-rich country at the center of Africa. They were also grateful for his support for the UNITA resistance in Angola. Mobutu understood that fear. He continually presented himself as the only barrier between regional order, chaos, and communist expansion.
So the worse the alternatives appeared, the more indispensable he became. But foreign assistance often strengthened Mobutu without strengthening the country's institutions. Corruption increased, public services weakened, and government became dependent upon one ruler.
After the Cold War ended, Mobutu's strategic value declined. American support weakened and then finally ended. His government collapsed in 1997.
And the country was left with weak institutions and continuing conflict.
That is another lesson. A foreign policy centered on one strong man may produce a weak state. The State Department's documentary records covert American funding after Mobutu's 1960 coup and continued programs designed to strengthen anti-communist Congolese governments.
There was a more terrible and more violent example presented in Indonesia. In 1965, a group of military officers with ties to the Indonesian Communist Party killed several senior generals in an attempted seizure of power. General Suharto took control of the army's response and put all the blame on the Communist Party.
The Army and allied organizations then launched a massive purge.
Yeah, a massive purge. Communist Party members, suspected sympathizers, union activists, teachers, ethnic Chinese Indonesians, intellectuals, and others associated with the political left were arrested or killed. The exact number remains disputed, but estimates commonly reach into the hundreds of thousands.
The United States did not create all the political and social tensions that produced the violence. Indonesia had its own military rivalries, political divisions, religious conflicts, and economic crisis.
But American officials welcomed the destruction of the Communist Party.
Yes, American documents show support for important anti communist military officers, including approval of communications equipment. Washington viewed Suharto's rise as a major strategic defeat for communism in Southeast Asia at the height of the Vietnam War.
Suharto eventually displaced President Sukarno and ruled Indonesia for approximately 3 decades.
So his government was authoritarian but cooperative with the West.
It welcomed foreign investment, opposed communism, and became strategically useful in Washington.
This case demonstrates why it is inaccurate to call every anti communist ruler in the developing world an American puppet. Suharto had his own military, domestic supporters, political ambitions, and enemies. The United States helped him but did not control him.
But it supported the side that won and accepted the repression that followed.
And once again, the immediate defeat of communism was treated as more important than the means used to achieve it. The State Department's documentary collection covers both the 1965 military reaction and the subsequent American relationship with Suharto's government. Let's turn to another issue. In Chile, Salvador Allende was elected president in 1970. He was a Marxist who pursued nationalism, expanded social programs, and developed closer relations with Cuba.
The next administration viewed Allende's government as a strategic threat and feared that a successful, democratically elected Marxist government could become a model for other countries in South America.
The CIA funded political organizations and propaganda against Allende.
It also participated in efforts to prevent Allende from taking office in 1970 and discussed encouraging a military intervention.
Chile's armed forces overthrew Allende on September 11, 1973. The available evidence does not establish that the CIA directed that particular coup exactly, and the CIA later denied helping Pinochet become president.
But the United States had worked to weaken Allende.
Yes, Washington had funded opposition activity and attempted to create political and economic pressure.
After the coup, the United States recognized and worked with the military junta.
Pinochet dissolved Congress, outlawed political parties, canceled elections, and ruled by force.
His government imprisoned and tortured opponents, executed prisoners, and caused people to, quote unquote, disappear.
Some American officials raised human rights concerns, especially as Congress and the Carter administration placed greater emphasis on the issue. But strategic and economic relations continued because Pinochet was anti communist and Chile remained important to American policy in South America.
So Washington didn't necessarily direct every action, but it preferred the anti-communist dictatorship to the elected Marxist government.
That is the historical conclusion. The State Department notes longstanding American covert activity against Allende, American satisfaction at his removal, and later concerned about the Pinochet government's human rights abuses.
Ferdinand Marcos was originally a very popular Democratic elected president of the Philippines. In 1972, however, citing a communist threat, he imposed martial law.
Opposition politicians, journalists, and critics were arrested.
Congress was neutralized. The press was restricted, and political authority became concentrated in Marcos, his family, and the security forces.
Marcos justified martial law by citing a communist insurgency, disorder, and threats to national stability.
And he was important to the United States, wasn't he, Dr. Dineen? What was that important role about?
Very important, Chandler. The Philippines contained two major American military facilities, Clark Air Base and Subic Bay Naval Base. Those bases supported American operations throughout Asia and the entire Pacific.
Marcos was also an anti communist ally who had supported the American position in Vietnam.
American officials knew that martial law was damaging democracy.
Their own documents discussed the suppression of political activity, restrictions on the press and judiciary, and the government's dependence on Marcos personally.
But those same documents stress the strategic value of the bases, a defense relationship, and Philippine dependence on American military supplies.
The United States eventually turned against Marcos after the disputed 1986 presidential election.
Yeah, mass demonstrations followed evidence of fraud and the collapse of support inside the Philippine military. The Reagan administration withdrew its backing and helped Marcos leave the country.
He was succeeded by Corazon Aquino, who restored democracy. But that happened only after years of political repression, corruption, and personal rule had made his position nearly impossible to defend. Official American records document Marcos's imposition of martial law, arrests of opponents and journalists, suppression of dissent, and the enormous strategic value Washington placed on its Philippine bases.
Now, I want to turn our attention now to Manuel Noriega. Now, he may be the clearest example of an American intelligence contact who later became a military enemy.
Over 20 years, Noriega rose to Panama's military and intelligence services. For years, he maintained relationships with American intelligence agencies and supplied information concerning Cuba, Central American political movements, drug trafficking, and regional conflicts.
He was useful because Panama controlled the canal, occupied a strategic location, and served as a center for intelligence activity throughout the region.
And American officials knew that Noriega was dangerous.
Declassified records described him as ruthless and opportunistic. American intelligence received information connecting him to corruption, political violence, bombings, and narcotics activity.
Yet, the relationship continued because Noriega still provided information and cooperated on certain American priorities.
Then he consolidated power in Panama.
He manipulated politics, intimidated his opponents, and nullified the result of the 1989 presidential election after the opposition appeared to win.
By that time, he had been indicted in the United States on drug trafficking charges. Relations deteriorated rather sharply.
And then President George H.W. Bush then ordered the invasion of Panama.
Operation Just Cause began in December 1989. More than 20,000 American troops were sent into Panama. Noriega eventually surrendered and was taken to the United States, tried, and convicted.
The same man who had once been considered a useful intelligence contact became the target of a full American military operation.
Which, may I say, Dr. Dineen, my uncle was a part of that operation that took them down.
Amazing.
So Noriega, was he an American puppet, Dr. Weaver?
Well, no, not really. One CIA assessment specifically warned that he was no one's agent and was loyal primarily to himself.
That statement captures the larger mistake. An intelligence relationship can provide access, but access is not control. American records describe Noriega as a ruthless opportunist years before the United States invaded Panama and arrested him in 1989.
Now let's turn to another wonderful person here. Saddam Hussein requires another important clarification. He was never a dependable American ally in the traditional sense.
Iraq had long-standing relations with the Soviet Union, and the Ba'ath Party pursued its own Arab nationalist agenda. Saddam was already recognized as ruthless before Washington began moving closer to him.
And then Iran's revolution changed the calculation.
After the Shah fell in 1979, Ayatollah Khomeini's revolutionary government became a major American adversary. The American embassy hostage crisis deepened that hostility. Saddam invaded Iran in 1980, beginning the Iran-Iraq War.
As the war continued, the Reagan administration became increasingly concerned that Iran might defeat Iraq and dominate the Persian Gulf.
That's right. So Washington tilted towards Saddam. Right, Dr. Weaver?
That's correct. The United States removed Iraq from its list of state sponsors of terrorism, restored diplomatic relations, approved economic assistance and agricultural credits, shared intelligence, and helped Iraq obtain certain equipment and supplies.
Former and future Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld, serving as President Reagan's special envoy, met Saddam in Baghdad in December 1983. That meeting symbolized the improving relationship.
The United States did not sell Saddam most of his weapons. Most of Iraq's major weapons came from the Soviet Union, France, China, and other suppliers. The United States was not Saddam's primary arms supplier.
But Washington provided valuable intelligence and economic support while knowing that Saddam's government was authoritarian and that Iraq was using chemical weapons.
And Dr. Weaver, that really makes the later change quite extraordinary.
Yeah, in August 1990, Saddam invaded Kuwait. Suddenly, the ruler Washington had treated as a useful counterweight in Iran became a direct threat to Saudi Arabia, Gulf oil supplies, and the international order.
The United States organized a large international coalition. The 1991 Persian Gulf War forced Iraqi forces out of Kuwait.
And 12 years later, in 2003, the United States invaded Iraq and removed Saddam completely.
The George W. Bush administration argued that Saddam possessed weapons of mass destruction and represented an unacceptable threat. Now, the stockpiles described before the invasion, they were not found.
Saddam was captured, transferred to Iraqi custody, tried by an Iraqi tribunal, and executed in 2006.
So this was not simply an anti-communist alliance that went wrong here.
No, it was a tactical relationship based on balancing Iran. When Saddam threatened different American interests, the relationship reversed. Bang.
Saddam's case shows the danger of helping one regional power because Washington fears another. The temporary counterweight may later become the principal threat. Documentary collections describe the American tilt towards Iraq during its war with Iran, while the State Department records the complete reversal after Saddam invaded Kuwait in 1990.
Now let's talk about Osama bin Laden. Now, it's often said that the United States armed and trained Osama bin Laden during the Soviet war in Afghanistan. Is that true, Dr. Weaver?
Well, yes and no, not in a direct way that the claim is usually presented. Osama bin Laden was not a dictator. He was a wealthy Saudi volunteer who went to Afghanistan during the war against the Soviet occupation.
The United States did provide billions of dollars in covert assistance to Afghan resistance groups of all kinds fighting the Soviets.
That was the CIA program commonly called Operation Cyclone.
Chandler, you're correct. American assistance was funneled primarily through Pakistan's Inter-Services Intelligence Agency. It's Pakistan that helped select Afghan factions, distribute the weapons, and train all kinds of fighters.
Yeah, but bin Laden and the group of foreign Arab volunteers surrounding him had their own money, charities, recruiters, financial networks, and training arrangements.
Did the CIA directly fund bin Laden?
The 9/11 Commission concluded that bin Laden and his comrades received little or no direct American assistance. It was all hidden.
That correction is important. The CIA supported many Afghan resistance factions. Bin Laden was a wealthy Arab volunteer operating in the same war, but that does not establish that he was a CIA agent or a direct recipient of American money.
Then why would we still consider Afghanistan an example of blowback?
Because the broader consequences were real even without direct support to bin Laden. The war created an international network of armed volunteers, recruiters, donors, training camps, intelligence contacts, and militant organizations. Pakistan's intelligence service directed much of the aid towards factions it considered useful, including hardline Islamist groups.
After the Soviet withdrawal, the United States sharply reduced its attention to Afghanistan. Rival Mujahideen factions fought one another. Government collapsed, and the Taliban eventually took control of most of the country.
Bin Laden had used the anti Soviet war to build contacts, a reputation, and organization.
By 1988, he helped establish Al Qaeda. He later became hostile to the United States, especially after American troops were stationed in Saudi Arabia during the Gulf crisis.
Al Qaeda, which means the base, attacked American embassies in East Africa in 1998, the USS Cole in 2000, and the United States itself on September 11, 2001.
The United States then spent years hunting someone who had first gained prominence in a war America had supported.
That is the accurate formulation. The United States did not simply create bin Laden and hand him weapons, but it supported a massive proxy war without adequately preparing for the political and military order that would follow.
Blowback does not always mean that yesterday's agent becomes today's enemy. It could mean that yesterday's policy created conditions, institutions, power vacuums, and weapons networks that later produced new enemies. The 9/11 Commission found that American and Saudi aid went to Afghan rebel groups through Pakistan, while bin Laden's Arab network had separate funding and received little to no direct American assistance.
It would be easy to say that every one of these policies failed, but is that really historically accurate?
Not completely, Chandler. In narrow strategic terms, some achieved their immediate objectives. The wartime alliance with Stalin helped defeat Nazi Germany. The Shah kept Iran out of the Soviet bloc for decades. Indonesia's Communist Party was destroyed. Mobutu aligned the Congo with the West. Marcos preserved American access to major military bases. Support for the Afghan resistance contributed to the Soviet withdrawal.
Those are tactical results. The strategic record is far more complicated. Support for dictators damaged American credibility and our acceptance throughout the Middle East. Washington spoke about liberty while supplying governments that denied it.
Yeah, and that contradiction was visible to the people living under those governments.
Yeah, they noticed the American weapons, the military training, the economic assistance, intelligence cooperation, diplomatic visits, and public praise.
The policy also encouraged anti Americanism. When an authoritarian government fell, anger was often directed not only at the dictator, but at the foreign power believed to have kept him in office.
Iran, is the clearest example here.
Yes, the Shah appeared stable until he suddenly was not. When his government collapsed, resentment accumulated since the 1953 coup helped shape the hostility directed towards the United States, primarily because of our actions.
These policies also confused order with stability. A government may appear quiet because criticism is forbidden, newspapers are censored, opponents are imprisoned, and elections are manipulated.
And that's not necessarily stability.
No, it isn't. It may simply mean that pressure is building where outsiders cannot see it.
Another problem was personalizing foreign policy. Washington often developed a relationship with one ruler rather than with the wider country.
And then when the ruler fell, America had few trusted relationships left.
And sometimes it helped weaken the democratic institutions that might have provided an alternative.
And the old phrase, "he is our son of a bitch," survives because it captures a recurring temptation. Just go ahead and ignore what a ruler does inside his country as long as he supports American interests outside it.
During the Cold War, American officials faced genuine dangers and difficult choices around the world. Communist governments could be expansionist and repressive. Military bases, oil supplies, shipping routes, alliances, and nuclear strategy were real concerns.
But those realities do not erase the mistakes. Washington repeatedly exaggerated communist threats, underestimated nationalism, weakened elected governments, and treated authoritarian rulers as the only available alternative.
And anti communism was not the only justification.
Correct. Stalin was supported against Hitler. Saddam was supported as a counterweight to Iran. Noriega was valued for his intelligence in Panama's strategic location. The Afghan resistance was assisted to defeat Soviet occupation.
The broader principle was the same. A partner's usefulness was given priority over his values, his conduct, or long term intentions, or how it would affect the people that he was ruling.
Or how it would affect the people moving forward. Then circumstances changed.
Stalin became the central Cold War adversary. Diem was abandoned during a coup. Somoza lost his American assistance. Marcos was forced into exile. Noriega became an American prisoner. Saddam became the target of two American wars. And bin Laden became the world's most wanted terrorist.
The United States did not create or control every one of these men, nor did every policy produce only failure. But American assistance strengthened rulers and movements whose future conduct Washington could not guarantee.
And the immediate question was always, can this person help us defeat today's enemy?
The question asked all too rarely was, what happens when today's partner no longer needs us or decides we are tomorrow's enemy?
A dictatorship may provide temporary order. A covert operation may achieve its immediate objective. A proxy army may defeat a shared opponent, but temporary cooperation is not loyalty. Access is not control, and repression is not stability.
And the people living under these governments also remember who supplied the weapons, who welcomed the ruler, and who decided that their freedom could wait.
And that memory, ladies and gentlemen, can last much longer than the alliance itself.
Yes. Well, we could go on. This is a very complex topic. But I want to thank you for listening to Things You Don't Know. Please give us a like, leave a comment, subscribe, and join us again as we examine the history behind the policies and decisions that continue to shape our world.
Yes, and tell us what you think about some of these policies. Come back soon, folks. Bye for now.
Bye bye.